college football fans, we are inching ever closer to the national championship game that will be on January 20th. We are just 2 weeks away from that game. We've got the semifinals coming up this week. And I know some guys that came on and talked about some of these games. The day they happen, talking about the kind of initial reactions. We'll dive into some of these games here, real quick here. But
we did not talk about the Boise State game. We did not talk about that. So
we'll highlight that one too. But I mean, right off the bat, man, Dylan, you were 100% right when you were talking about, your Buckeyes, and that Oregon game was going to be a totally different game than what we saw earlier in the season. One thing to note, all the teams that had that first round bye lost. Whereas like your Oregon State team or your Ohio State team came out and was able to have that game against Tennessee, where they were able to kind of come out and, establish themselves, carried that momentum over into this next week, and, just put the hurt on Oregon. And man, when it was, I believe 34-8 at halftime, I was like, this is insane to be watching right now.
Yeah, I mean, I came on and talked about it after the games, but I'll say it again. I told you, all right, on last week's show, I told you that Oregon had been sitting for about 3.5 weeks or so, just like any other, just like all the bye teams did. But we came off of an absolute thumping to Tennessee, so all the momentum was in. The exact words I think I said was the momentum was all in our favor. All right, we're coming off a hot win against a good SEC team that no one thought was going to happen, including myself. I did not think we were going to play that well, so we carried all the momentum in. And I did say that if Oregon. I thought Oregon was probably going to come off a little rusty, and if we could not be the traditional Ohio State team and start slow, if we could do what we did against Tennessee and start off hot, it was not going to work out in Oregon's favor, and we did. I think the first two plays we went 74 yards and a touchdown. Jeremiah Smith had a touchdown. I believe he had over 100 yards and a touchdown or two before halftime. Will Howard had 212 passing yards in the first quarter alone, which I did not think. I mean, I don't think anyone saw that coming. I mean, Will Howard, he's a very accurate passer. I think him and Dylan Gabriel came into this game both averaging the same completion percentage, like 73.9-ish, almost 74% on completed passes. And Will Howard stayed true to that, man. I mean, he picked up right where he left off against the Tennessee game, picked right up where he left off. And I said after the game, I said the game plan was to throw to number 4. That's what it was. And that's what we did. And they just kept leaving him open, which I honestly couldn't believe. I mean, they played man against him a lot against Jeremiah Smith, and it just did not work out for Oregon whatsoever. He literally burned them. And I said during the show too, earlier in the week, I think it was like Wednesday, or it was the week before, or a couple days before, or whatever, before that game. Jeremiah Smith, I guess, I don't know if he put it on Twitter or Instagram, but he did post something, and he said, "I'm letting you guys know right now, if you play man coverage, there's not a single person who can cover me." It's exactly what he said. So he basically gave like a warning to Oregon, like, don't do that. And they tried to, and it just did not work out at all.
I was about to say, and that's one of those things where you see that before the game, you're like, man, this guy thinks high of himself. But he comes out and he backs that up. He backs the talk up. So that it's not like he just said it and then, he would, didn't come out and, he only caught 2 catches for, 20 yards. He came out and balled out and did what exactly he said he was going to do. This kid's going to be a stud. He's only a freshman, and, he's going to come back next year. Going to be a stud next year, and I have a feeling he's going to be a very high draft pick whenever he is draft eligible and decides to go. So,
I think he's the best receiver in college, to be honest. I mean, the kid he's probably the most NFL ready receiver. No offense to Travis Hunter, but this kid is incredible. And I just want to say credit to Ohio State's defense again. There's a reason why they're the best defense in college football. They were all over Dylan Gabriel. They basically shut down the run. I know Cook got hurt and left the game for Oregon, so that was a big blow to them. But they couldn't run the ball at all. Dylan Gabriel, I think he might have had 200 yards passing, somewhere around there, and a couple touchdowns. But I know for most of the game, we basically held Dylan Gabriel in check. He was able to roll the pocket some, but we were able to manage him. There was a lot of QB spies. They basically managed Dylan Gabriel all game long. This was completely different than the first game. Everything Oregon was capable of doing in that first game, we did everything to possibly stop that, and it worked. So credit to Ohio State's defense, because I think they did what everybody thought, they weren't going to be able to do. I'm not saying people thought they were going to lose, but I didn't think that they were going to be able to hold Oregon like that. So I thought it was going to be like another 3-point game, that 1 point margin once again, but they came out and they did their thing. So I was happy to see that.
Yeah. And we'll dive into more of those specific stats here in a little bit, but let's back it up here. And, I know you guys talked about some of these games, but, you mentioned the game you didn't talk about was Penn State, Boise State on New Year's Eve. And I was afraid this was happening. And, we talked about this. We said this game was either going to be close or it's going to be a potentially blowout. Nowhere in between. And unfortunately, it was the latter there. Penn State beats Boise State 31-14. Drew Aller for Penn State goes for 171 and 3 touchdowns. On the flip side, that Madsen for Boise State, not great. Threw for 304 yards, fantastic. 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions, though. Didn't take care of the ball, turned it over. Ashton Genty, 30 carries for only 104 yards. So they bottled him up. I will say about that, yes, they bottled him up, but I don't want to see all these haters out here saying he was overrated just because he got bottled up against a tough team. That doesn't mean what he's done all year, how talented he is in question. I think Boise State's offensive line, their capabilities just went up against the, bigger, more talented team, if we're being honest. So, Allen, the running back for Penn State, 17 carries, 134 yards. Warren, the tight end for Penn State, 63 yards receiving for 2 touchdowns. But yeah, Penn State showed up and they keep, it's like we said each week, can James Franklin, continue to get it done, and each week they're getting it done. And I guess he's trying to prove the haters wrong, if you will.
Yeah, it was an interesting game. Credit to Boise State, because even though the score didn't reflect it, I thought they played really well against Penn State. Penn State, they caught fire at a really good time. They're playing really good. They've been a good team. They just obviously, they have trouble beating Ohio State and some of these other teams. They played really well against Oregon. A lot of people didn't expect that, including us. I thought that was going to be an absolute beating, and it wasn't. They played really good to them, so I think they helped them carry some momentum into the playoffs, knowing that they could keep up with the best team in college football at the time. But Boise State played really well. Like you said, they just went up against a better team. Penn State's defense is really good. We're not talking Midwest anymore. Like, we're talking like a Big Ten team, a really good Big Ten team. So their defense is really good. Penn State's offense it's always pretty good. They just came out there and balled out. And, we both said if they could bottle up Ashton, it probably wasn't going to work out in Boise State's favor. And he broke away. He had some good runs, but 99% of the game, they were able to hold that man in check. And that front line for Penn State, they were able to break through the line and get to him quick, stop him from breaking, because there was a lot of opportunities where he'd get the ball in the backfield, and you could see some holes opening up, and you're like, oh, okay, he's gonna break away, but they would instantly close that hole and they'd get right to him. And then the times that he did break away and had decent runs, they didn't let that get to them. They regrouped and they got right back after him. And Maddox, I thought he played well. He had some good plays, but when you turn the ball over that much, it's hard. They don't play teams like this. They played Oregon, but that's about it. So it's hard to prepare when you play, when you don't play as good as teams as you just played. And again, I know we've said it a million times, and I'm going to say it again. I think if you win, right, you win your respective championship game, I think you deserve a bye. You really do. That's the whole point. Some sort of incentive for winning. But at the same time, I think 3 weeks that's probably too much, because every team that won Their respective championship game was on a bye. They lost. So I just think that's too much. I think they came out super rusty, just like some of these other teams, like Georgia and like Oregon. So I think if maybe Boise State wasn't so rusty, maybe they play a little better. But it's hard to do that when you go up against a really good Penn State team.
Yeah, I mean, kind of Penn State's game plan worked exactly how they wanted it to. Bottle up Ashton Gindy and force Matson to try to beat you to the air. Yeah, he put up 300 yards, but turned it over 3 times. So, I mean, that game plan worked perfectly for Penn State. And you know what you're saying, maybe part of that is like you scoot or, adjust the days that you play. That way, maybe though you still have those buys, but those teams aren't sitting for 3 weeks. Maybe it's 2 weeks. I don't know how you fix that, or if that is something that you can change logistically to make it work. But maybe that's something they consider for next year.
Yeah, do that. Take away the buys. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know if you win, you want to reward those guys for winning their championship game. But at the same time, I know this is the first type of year for the 12-team playoff, and some games have gone good. Some games have proven that this is maybe not so hot. But, I mean, I think they should – I don't know if teams sitting for 3 weeks should be something that happens, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So Penn State moves on after taking care of business against Boise State. They'll be playing Notre Dame, which was another one of the surprising games to me. Before we jump to that game, we'll talk about Texas-Arizona State game that, I think we both kind of said, hey, this is going to be a blowout. That was not the case here. Props to Arizona State for fighting back. They didn't give up at one point that they were at halftime, they were down 21-3. They come out and get down 21-8. And, at that point in the third quarter, you're just like, well, it seems like Texas can ice this game, run the clock out, kind of rely on the rushing game that they had success against Clemson. Arizona State had other points. They scored 16 points in the fourth quarter to Texas' 7 to force overtime. And, this game was really, if you look at it, this comeback was led by one Cam Scatabo. What a game he had in this game, kind of to will his team back. He threw a touchdown pass, 1 for 1 for 42 yards and a touchdown. He comes out 30 carries for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then also has 99 yards receiving. So he was Mr. Do-It-All for Arizona State. And unfortunately, they came up short in overtime, in that double overtime. But this was a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely needed it, right? I mean, there's been a lot of blowouts in this college football playoff so far. So this was the game that we needed, right? This is what we hope the 12-team college playoff brings us. Like that's the whole point of allowing more teams in, is to get better games like these and to give teams that maybe won't get there or maybe skeptical, shouldn't be there. It gives them a chance to come in and maybe show that they can compete with teams like Texas, right? I mean, you're talking a Big 12 team against an SEC team and one of the better SEC teams. So, I mean, it was a game we needed. Credit to Cam Scatabo. I said it once when we had the show after the game. I'll say it again. No one on that team wanted to do anything besides him, and he basically did it all. That touchdown pass he threw, that shifted all the momentum in their direction. And after that, I mean, he did not slow down. The guy was Mr. Do-It-All, as you said. If it wasn't for him, if you take him off that team, they probably get blown out of the freaking water. Because it started off to look like that, how we predicted. I mean, it was not looking hot. And then Arizona State's defense stepped up. And besides when they got down early, they made some mistakes, but they fixed all their mistakes, and they were able to shut Texas down the rest of the game, basically. And I think it was like 7.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, down 16. Cam Scatabo said, "Feed me the rock." That man just did everything. He did everything himself. And it was a great game. It really was. I thought Arizona State was going to win. There were some missed calls on both sides. I know people are talking about the targeting call that probably should have been called on Texas. That would have gave Arizona State the first down and to finish the game without going to overtime. But at the same time, Arizona State had a nasty hit on a Texas player that could have been called targeting. He didn't leave with his helmet, but he put all of his weight right into the kid's face, and he came from across the field. So, that probably could have been called targeting too. So I think that the reason they didn't call it is because they didn't call that one. So kind of let him play. I would have been fine with calling it, whatever. But Arizona State should hold their head high because they just competed with one of the best teams in football. And they came up that close. They had Quinn Ewers on a 4th and 13 in overtime. It was 4th and 13. Anything could have happened. So I know they're upset. I watched the post-conference football game. I know they were upset, but they played fantastic, man. They really did.
Yeah. Like you said, this was a game that we needed, with so many blowouts. We needed a game that was fun, close, kind of kept you on the edge of your seat, if you will, like this. And so Texas moves on, and they'll take on Ohio State. We'll get into that preview here in just a little bit, which should be another exciting game. And we kind of already talked about the Ohio State-Oregon game. We'll dive into some stats really quickly. Will Howard, 319 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Dylan Gabriel, 299 yards and 2 touchdowns. Both guys, no picks. Travion Henderson for Ohio State, 8 carries, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. Quinshon Judkins, 85 yards, no score. On Oregon side, Noah Whittington, 6 carries for 3 yards and a touchdown. Jordan James, 7 carries, 14 yards. They lost a guy or two early. And so, they kind of just, like you said, that defense came out of Ohio State and just shut down everything they were trying to do. The stats you're talking about, Jeremiah Smith, 7 receptions, 187 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Then it was starter number 2. That's what it was.
And then Emeka Egbuka, 5 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown as well. A guy that he's probably going to be a first-round pick as well. Ohio State has no shortage of talented wide receivers on this roster, and these are 2 of just the next ones to come out. And they're going to have more coming in, and other recruiting classes. So it's going to be fun to watch. But for Oregon receiving, their leading receiver, Trayshawn Holden, 7 receptions, 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. So kind of trying to match some numbers there of Jeremiah Smith, but, coming up short there. But at the end of the day, like we said, totally different matchup. Don't want to, continue saying the same thing over and over again. But, fantastic job by Ohio State to, come back after that first loss, game plan, and, just shut Oregon down. And it probably helped in their favor that Oregon, like you said, sat for 3 weeks. Ohio State was, beating a tough SEC team, getting in rhythm, carrying that over. So it's impressive. I was shocked, but good game. And then the All-State Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia postponed due to the incidents that happened down in Louisiana. So it took place the day after New Year's. 23-10, Notre Dame beats Georgia, where, we talked about it. I don't know. I don't think it's the sole reason they lost, but you look at Gunnar Stockton, 20-32 for 234 yards and a touchdown. Okay, game. Nothing spectacular. Didn't turn over the ball. No interceptions there, but his receivers didn't help him out much either. So many drop balls in this game. I didn't realize the stat until they showed it. During the game, Georgia led all FBS teams in drops on the season. There were several receivers that dropped. There was one wide open touchdown pass that hits the guy off the hands. Would have been a walk-in score. So Riley Lenoard for Notre Dame, 15-24, 90 yards and a touchdown. Carries it 14 times for 80 yards. On the receiving end, Bo Collins, 13 yards for the touchdown in that game. Trevor Etienne, 11 carries, 38 yards, bottled up this Georgia run game. But man, Georgia just we talked about it, middle of the season going forward. They just did not look like their normal Georgia selves. Carson Beck towards the middle of the season started playing really bad. It's still the same tough Georgia defense, but that offensive side of the ball just kind of lacked some of those key factors that it did in years past. On top of good quarterback play, but receivers dropping passes. I mean, that's gonna hurt you a lot. You're there to do one thing, catch the ball. It's like the old saying goes, kids get moved to defensive back, cornerback for one reason, because they're a wide receiver, they can't catch the ball. So,
yeah, it's I don't know. I want to say that sitting for a couple weeks, probably led into this, but at the same time, like even if you put Carson Beck in there, I don't think they win this game. To be honest, he wasn't playing so great, so I don't think there's really. I mean, I'm sure that might have gave them like a little more a confidence boost having their star quarterback in there or whatever. But I don't want to take anything away from Notre Dame. I know I've been kind of a hater on them a little bit, but they played really well, so I can't really hate on Notre Dame whatsoever. They played better than I anticipated because Georgia's considered probably the best SEC team for the last handful of years, right there with Alabama when Nick Saban was coaching them. I feel like they're considered the 1 or 2 in the SEC. And Kirby Smart's a hell of a coach. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's probably the best coach in football, if not one or 2. But I kind of feel like they might have came in this game underestimating Notre Dame a tad bit. Like, hey, this is a team that doesn't play in a conference. Like, they play a bunch of nobodies. They play mostly teams. Like Riley Lenoard can't really throw the ball a whole lot. He's more of like just a mobile quarterback. He's not like the greatest arm or whatever. But Riley Lenoard, I thought he did a decent job, decent enough to hold his own. I know he struggled a little bit in the beginning of the game, but it seemed like more into the game he started to come into his own, which was nice to see. They're able to run the ball a little bit, so that was nice to see. But Georgia's defense was. I thought it was miserable. They didn't play very well. And on the flip side, which I didn't think was going to happen, Notre Dame's defense was phenomenal. I mean, they played really well. So I have nothing bad to say about Notre Dame. They went in there, and I think they felt maybe underappreciated, maybe disvalued. I don't think they really like that, to be honest. Like what I said, you're going up against one of the better SEC teams. That's probably all they heard. Like, what are you going to do against Georgia's defense? What are you going to do against their offense? Like, you guys don't play teams like this. They went in there and they took care of business. Their defense played phenomenal. They were able to shut Georgia down in basically every category. And I know they had their second string quarterback in, but he's still a 4-star recruit. He got accepted to Georgia for a reason. He's the backup behind Carson Beck for a reason. Notre Dame's defense went in and handled business. And Riley Lenoard toward the end, he had a couple big runs, couple big passes to kind of keep that ball moving and was eating the play clock. So, I mean, credit to Notre Dame. They played really well. That's probably one of their better games they played all season long, to be honest. I thought they did everything flawlessly. So,
yeah. I mean, you look at it, and if you're Georgia, you're going into the half, down 13-3. So you're like, okay, it's a 10-point game. Let's regroup at halftime, come out, and if our defense can keep doing what they're doing, we can score some points. We're right back in this game. Well, Notre Dame had different plans. They opened up the second half with a 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown to open the third quarter. So that automatically makes Notre Dame have all that momentum. Like you said, they just didn't let up. I mean, final score is 23-10, so they held Georgia to 7 points for the rest of the game, and they put up an additional 10 in the second half. I mean, this Notre Dame defense, I want to say they said they were number 2 in the country, right behind Ohio State. So, I mean, this is a tough defense. I mean, both these games, for a while there was a defensive slugfest with field goals after field goal, until kind of Notre Dame really broke it open there. So
they're scary.
Yeah,
they're scary because if Riley Leonard can, if he can catch himself in a game where he's just on it, like where he shows glimpses of all season, just like he showed at Duke, right? Showed really great glimpses of games. Notre Dame has the defense, or they can make some stops when they need to, and like not just like minor stops, like they can make big plays in big moments. And if Riley Leonard can just stay consistent and have his games, they're gonna be, I hate to say it, but they're gonna be a tough team to beat anywhere for the rest of the playoffs. I mean, Penn State's gonna, isn't that they play Penn State?
Yes.
Yeah, Penn State's gonna have their hands full. That'll be a very interesting game. That'll be very interesting.
I agree 100% with you. If that defense keeps up that intensity, Riley Leonard can take care of the ball and, like you said, play like he can, and kind of show those flashes that he's shown in the past. This Notre Dame team is going to be tough to beat. We'll just go ahead and roll into Notre Dame. Will take on Penn State on January 9th at 6:30 in the Capital One Orange Bowl, held down in Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins. And Notre Dame comes in as a 1.5-point favorite in this game.
They probably should.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be close. 44.5 is the over-under for this game. So you look at this, Riley Leonard, Drew Aller, probably one of the best defenses he's going to see all season, other than, when he saw Ohio State late in the season in the Big Ten. And, both these teams coming off their wins. I think it's going to come down to, in this game, if you look at between these two teams, on Penn State side, can Drew Aller take care of the ball and, run this offense like we've seen him do? On Notre Dame side, can you keep that defensive intensity up and, keep that aggressiveness up? And then can Riley Leonard do enough to get it done? Can he play a clean game, do enough to get it done? And if you're Notre Dame, you have to make sure you're not running into the punter two times in a row this game, because that happened against Georgia and, gave them back-to-back penalties. And so, that just shows you the intensity and aggression that they have on defense. And, they have 6 punt blocks on the season, and that's for a reason. So, I mean, your initial thoughts on this game, and, do you think Notre Dame has what it takes to get it done, or does James Franklin fall short again and miss out on the big one?
This is a very good game, because I feel like these two teams are a lot alike, right? I think Notre Dame probably has a slightly better defense, slightly. I think Penn State does have a good defense. In my eyes, I think Penn State probably has the better offense, and that's just because I feel like Drew, I feel like he's more consistent. I feel like the run game is a little more consistent, and they got some. I think just offensively they're just a little better. Not much, but I think it comes down to the quarterback play. When you talk about offenses, it's a hard game for me to pick because these teams are so alike. I think Penn State could win this game. I think Notre Dame could win this game. But I'm gonna pick Notre Dame here. I think Penn State. I think their run probably falls a little bit short. I think their offense probably does, gets their own, holds their own, is able to score some points. But I think Notre Dame's defense is it's just too good. Last time Drew played a really good defense, he didn't perform so hot when he played Ohio State. He struggled a lot. I just don't know if he's going to be able to move the ball consistently. And if all it's going to take is for him to make just a couple mistakes, that's all it's going to take. And I think Riley Leonard is a quarterback. He might not be the greatest, but I feel like if he gets in a rhythm, he can be consistent. I feel like he can control the ball enough where they can run down some clock to win the game, kind of like what he did against Georgia. He was able to make some big. He ran for a couple big first downs, and they were able to eat more clock and keep the ball moving. So I think on that fact, just based on Notre Dame's defense, I'm going to pick Notre Dame to win here. It's probably a one-score game, touchdown or a field goal. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a game that goes to overtime, to be honest, because there's so much alike in my opinion. But I think James Franklin falls short again in a big game, so I'm going to take Notre Dame here.
Yeah. So I looked it up what you're talking about. So Drew Aller's game against Ohio State, he went 12 of 20, 146 yards, 1 interception, rushed 10 times for 31 yards. So not a lot going on there. Turned over the ball. He's going to have a much better game in this one. And when I look at it, yeah, it's like you said, both defenses for the most part are probably evenly matched. I would, like you said, give the edge to Notre Dame a little bit. But when it comes to offenses, it seems like productive-wise, Drew Aller's been more productive this year. When you look at it, it's just incredible what Tyler Warren's done. Their leading receiver as their tight end, 98 receptions for 1,158 yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, that's just impressive. I've rolled on them once. Give me Penn State. I'm gonna see if James Franklin can continue to get it done here. Just purely off liking Boise State. I picked them last week, but we said that it was either going to go one way or the other this week. I'm going to take Penn State to see if they can get it done against Notre Dame. I like their offensive edge just a tad bit more than I do Notre Dame, but we'll see what happens there. And as we kind of move on here, the game that you're itching to talk about, Dylan, your Ohio State Buckeyes taking on Texas in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic down in AT&T Stadium in Jerry World. Ohio State comes in as 5-point favorite in this game, rightfully so, with what they've done against Tennessee, what they did against the number 1 overall seed, and just rolled them. Texas struggled. They get the wins, but they struggle a little offensively as far as Quinn Ewers' play goes. Your initial thoughts on this game coming in, and Ohio State's coming in super hot. You come off back-to-back games where you put up 40-plus points and held your opponent to 17, and so they're rolling. Texas is, they've gotten the job done, but they've struggled a little bit. Should be an interesting game.
Yeah, I want to say it's going to be close. It's going to be a good game. Texas has a really good defense. If their offense can play well, they're a really good offense. But I don't know, because, okay, they won the game, right? They should have lost against Arizona State. They shouldn't even be here. They should have lost. Arizona State was there. Quinn Ewers was just good enough to make some plays when it mattered, and I guess that's really all that matters. But they literally force-fed that game to Arizona State. They basically said, we don't even want to play anymore, so please just beat us. And Arizona State almost did with one player, because no one else wanted to do anything besides Arizona State's defense. On offense, it was literally Cam Scatterbo. That was it. I don't know. I think Texas is probably in for a little bit of trouble. We're hot. We smacked Tennessee. We came in and we smacked Oregon, which I think a lot of people did not see coming whatsoever. A lot of people, I think, were surprised that we came in there and we literally handed it to them. 34-8 at halftime. I mean, the game was basically over at that point in time. We literally ended the game at halftime. That was it.
I was about to say, you scored one more touchdown in the second half.
So, obviously, I'm gonna pick Ohio State to win. I want to say it's gonna be close, but it's hard for me to say we're not gonna win by 10 points because of how hot we are. I don't want to put a jinx on us. I haven't put it on us yet, so I'm gonna keep it rolling like that. I think Ohio State wins. I think offensively we're way better. I think defensively we're way better. I think every aspect of everything we're way better. I don't think anyone's going to be able to cover Jeremiah Smith and hold Henderson and Judkins and Abud. I can't even say his name, but I don't think their defense is going to be able to hold all of those players at the same time. it's not going to happen. And Quinn Ewers has not played so hot. He started the season really well the first 2 games. Then he had that abdominal injury. He got hit pretty hard, had an abdominal injury. They said it was season ending. Then they came back like a day later, said it wasn't so bad. But if you notice after that, his play has been really up and down. He's been sacked more. He's taken more sacks. He's thrown more interceptions. He hasn't looked okay since the injury. And when you're going to go up against the best defense in college football, that's going to be a problem for him. I mean, you almost lost to Arizona State. No offense. You let Clemson come all the way back on you. That's not going to happen. I think we start off hot again, and I think that's probably the end of it for Texas. I'm going to take Ohio State to win. I'm going to say it's a one-score game. I'm going to say we win by a touchdown, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than that. But I'm just going to say one score. I think we win 1 score.
Yeah, I think this has the chance to be an interesting game, like you said. And for me, it comes down to the play, like you just outlined there, the play of Quinn Ewers. I think that's probably going to be, what can hurt or help Texas. I mean, I feel like their defense can, do enough to, if they, like you said, to make it a close game. But if Quinn Ewers can't come out and have a decent game in this one, we talked about it before we jumped on here. If he struggles in that first half, I mean, you have a spot in the national title on the line. Do you potentially give Arch Manning a shot in the second half if Quinn has a couple turnover picks in the first half, hasn't been looking his best, and see what Arch can do. He had some starts under his belt early in the season, but I think that's what it comes down to for me is what does Quinn Ewers look like? Because I feel like Texas's defense is just good enough. Like you said, I don't think they'll be able to, 100% cover up Jeremiah Smith. He's probably going to get his. But at the end of the day, that's the question mark for me. Can Quinn Ewers get the job done, like you said, after not really looking the same? I mean, we looked through some of the stats, since he got hurt against UTSA, came back against Oklahoma, 199 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. His best game that he had since coming back from the injury was against Florida, where he threw for 333 yards and 5 touchdowns. Clean game, no interceptions there. But you look at the games where they get to him and they put pressure on him. That first matchup against Georgia where they lost 30-15 at home, he was sacked 5 times, and he finished with 2 touchdowns and an interception. That close, barely beating Vanderbilt. 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, got sacked 4 times. Fast forward to the SEC championship game. They lost to Georgia again in a close one where he threw for 358 yards, but 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and got sacked 6 times. When this offensive line isn't protecting him, he really struggles. And it seems like he doesn't have that, like you were talking about before we jumped on, that sense of pressure. He seems to be taking more sacks than what he did beforehand. Even against Arizona State, took 3 sacks, had one of his better performances, going 20 of 30 for 322 and 3 touchdowns and then 1 interception. But if you come in and have a game like, say, Clemson, where he only threw for 202 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, it's not going to get it done against this, red-hot Ohio State team. And I think that's where the Sarkisian make that call saying, Quinn, you've been our guy, but you're just not cutting it today. Arch, here you go. Kind of like a scenario a few years ago in the bowl game where Saban benched Jalen Hurts and put Tua in to win the game. Not saying this is going to be like that, but it's a similar scenario. Hurts wasn't getting it done, and he said, all right, we understand you've been our guy, but, it's just not, you don't have it today. So that's what's going to come down to it for me. This is a tough one to pick for me because I don't like Texas. Not the biggest fan of Ohio State. It's a tough one. But it's hard to deny what they've been doing. And I've got to say Ohio State probably wins this one. I mean, if you look at 2 teams, the trajectory they're on, Ohio State is climbing fast right now. And Texas looks like they're kind of, just level there. They're not necessarily going up and they're not necessarily going down, but their performance hasn't been getting better like it needs to be each round you go further in the playoffs.
No, and I would say Ohio State's definitely the team to beat right now. If you don't think that, I think you probably just hate Ohio State. It's hard to deny what they've done. But like you said, against the game against Arizona State, he had 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. But you got to remember, 2 of those touchdowns came in overtime, where they probably shouldn't even been anyways. They're lucky that targeting call didn't get called, because if it does, it sets Arizona State up with the first down, above midfield, I believe, and they probably win that game, to be honest. So he did not play well for about 99% of that game. He just played good where it mattered, and I guess that's really all that matters. But he had 2 touchdowns back to back in overtime. He had one on the 4th and 13, it's like a 28-yard touchdown pass, and then he had one on the first play, basically of the second overtime, to his tight end. So until then, he had 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So didn't play so hot against Arizona State. I would say if he doesn't get off to a good start, if Texas does not get off to a hot start, I could see this game getting really out of hand for them. I will say, though, I can't just sit here and praise Ohio State, right? I have to say something bad about them. I will say that I think if we were to lose this game, I would say it's because we probably come in super confident, maybe a little too overconfident, like, hey, we just smacked one of the better SEC teams. We just smacked the number 1 team in the nation, Oregon. Like, we held their run game in check. We held Dylan Gabriel in check. We held everybody in check. They weren't able to do anything. We basically told them what we were going to do, and we did it, and they couldn't stop us. So that's what I think could be the issue if Ohio State loses, is maybe they come in too overhyped on themselves, and then Will Howard starts making mistakes. Maybe our defense doesn't get, some of those stops they usually get, and Texas is able to move the ball. So that's just something that Ohio State's going to have to be worried about. Don't get too overhyped on yourself. You played 2 really good games. Keep playing the way you're playing, but don't come in as one of those teams like, yeah, we're not worried about Texas, because Texas is a really good team, and if you don't worry about them, that's an issue. That's a problem.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Do you think in this game, Quinn Ewers could be, a little bit extra locked in, extra motivated going against Ohio State, where he originally enrolled in school at years ago? He could be a factor where he wants to have success and, beat the team where he originally went and then transfer it out of.
I don't know if that has motivation for him, but I could see, because he played so bad against Arizona State. I know he had 3 touchdowns, like I just said, but 2 of those came in overtime, and he was lucky to be there. I think if anything's going to give him motivation, it's that. That's a team that they were thumping them to begin with. Like, a game probably should have been close. And the defense gave some stops. The offense had some mistakes. They had a lot of 3-and-outs. They couldn't move the ball at all after halftime. Literally could not move it whatsoever. So if anything was to give him motivation, I think it's he knows he played really bad against Arizona State. I think he knows he was lucky to get into overtime. And he was lucky that Arizona State just blew some coverage that they probably shouldn't have blown. And we're talking the game's over with. So if anything's going to give him motivation, I think it's that. This is a second chance. And you don't get a lot of those, because that's a game they should have lost. And we're talking about, you're a game away from the national championship. You're playing probably the best team right now in college. You have a second chance. This is your time to go out there and shine and show that you are better than what you showed in that Arizona State game, and that, you made some mistakes, you're owning up for them, and it's time to go in there and lock in and make some good plays. I think if anything's going to give him motivation, it's probably that.
Yeah, I can see that point there. It's going to be interesting to watch. I can't wait for it. Should be 2 more great games this weekend. Yeah. We'll jump over real quick, even though it's not necessarily, the biggest game, but you've got the FCS championship going on right now, and Montana State is playing North Dakota State, and they've cut the lead to 3. It's 28-25 with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Just a quick look at the stats here. Cam Miller is the do-it-all guy for North Dakota State. Just a quick update here. 16 of 19 for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. He is the leading rusher with 15 carries and 117 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground as well.
Lord have mercy. He's doing it all himself.
He really wants to win there, to continue that trend of North Dakota State and South Dakota State just being the 2 teams that win this every year, it seems like. So, quick update there. And then, I'll turn it over to you, Dylan. We have our next 2 games for the matchup here for what we started last week at the all-time best college teams.
Yep. So, you picked Miami, the 2001 Miami team, who probably is people consider probably the best team college football has ever had. Also, the 2006 Texas team with Vince Young there. So, the first matchup we have is what people consider one of the better college football teams to ever come through college football, right? You have the 2019 LSU Tigers against the 2008 Florida team, who people also consider one of the better college football teams to ever come around. So LSU went 15-0. They scored a total of 726 points. That was 48.5 points a game. They allowed 328 points, which is about 21, 22 points a game. Just a couple names on this team. It's probably, in my eyes, it's probably recently one of the better offenses to probably ever roll through college football. You have Joe Burrow, who is one of the better quarterbacks, I would say probably one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL to date. You had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who at that time was an animal in college, and he had a few good years with the Chiefs as well. And then you have 2 of the best receivers in the NFL right now. People probably say 1 and 2. You put them however you want. One of them just won the Triple Crown. It was announced today. Jamar Chase just won the Triple Crown in the NFL. He had the most receptions, most receiving yards, most touchdowns. And then you also have Justin Jefferson. So just imagine that offense. You have Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in his prime, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, all in the same offense. So pretty crazy. They had a really solid defense too. And then you look to the 2008 Florida team. They went 13-1. They had a total of 611 points scored, 43.5 points a game. They allowed 181 points throughout the season, 12.9 points a game. The older teams seem to have more notable players on it, more notable players to list. So just on this team, I'm sure you probably know most of them. First and foremost, you have the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Tebow, probably one of the better college quarterbacks to ever roll through college football. Percy Harvin, who in his prime in the NFL too was fantastic. Riley Cooper, which was Tim Tebow's roommate, he was really good in college, and he played okay sometimes in the NFL. Brandon Spikes, who was an all-star linebacker for the New England Patriots. Chris Rainey, Jeff Demps, who were crazy for Florida, probably one of the better people at their respective positions. And then you had Joe Hayden, and then I can't forget this guy. You had Aaron Hernandez, who obviously had his own demons he had to fight with. But at one time, I'll say it, he was probably going to be the replacement. He was going to be the replacement for Gronk. And if he would have never did what he did, if he would have just been a clean, straight-up guy, I'll say it, he probably was going to be one of the better tight ends in football in the NFL. He had a crazy amount of skill sets. He was a big dude. He was pretty quick. He ran really good routes. He had hands. It was like another Gronkowski, to be honest, which was terrifying considering those two played on the same team at the same time. And they lined up on opposite sides of each other. So if you were to put those two teams up against each other, right, a 2008 Florida team who went 13-1, averaged 43.5 points a game, against a more modernized, probably highfalutin offense, LSU team who went 15-0 and averaged 48.5 points a game. if you were to put those two together in your head, who do you think probably walks out of there?
It's another tough one. These are all fun to talk about. Um, I break my own trend here, and I think I got to go with the LSU team. I picked both two of the older teams in the first two matchups, so it's just hard to argue with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, all those guys. That version of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. All those guys on the Florida team that you listed off, fantastic. Had great careers. Tebow was probably out of all of them the most surprising one that didn't necessarily pan out their greatest, but I think that LSU team gets it done.
Yeah, I wanted to pick Florida just because I like Tim Tebow and I like Percy Harvin. Don't get me wrong, their offense was highfalutin too. I mean, you had Chris Rainey, Jeff Demps, Percy Harvin, Riley Cooper, Aaron Hernandez, Tim Tebow. But I think when you talk about a more modernized type of football game, I don't know, that LSU team with that type of offense, that's just kind of hard to deny. And their defense was pretty decent too. I just think they're able to put up more points against that team than the 2008 Florida team would be able to put up against them. Almost like an Oregon type of game. Like, I can score more points than you, and I don't think you're going to be able to score as much as me. So I'll move on to the last game. We have a 2018 Clemson Tigers team, 15-0. All right, scored 664 points, 44.3 points a game. They allowed 197 points total for the season, 13.1 points a game. You had people like Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Adam Choice. You had guys like Hunter Renfrow, Amari Rogers, Will Sweeney, T. Higgins, TJ Chase, Justin Ross, Trevion Thompson. So, a very highfalutin type of college team. And Trevor Lawrence was a significantly good college quarterback. So, and you're going to put them up against the 2004 USC Trojans, 13-0. Coach at the time, I forgot, Pete Carroll was their coach. They scored 496 total points, 38.2 points a game. They allowed 169, 13 points a game. They allowed all season long. They had people like Matt Lenoard, Matt Castle was also on there. They had the one and only Reggie Bush. They had Lindell White, who was their leading receiver. Steve Smith, Dwayne Jarrett, Jason Mitchell, Alex Holmes. And their defense was decently solid too. They had Josh Pinkard, Terrell Thomas, Tom Malone, Desmond Reed, Eric Wright, Justin Watt, Manuel Wright, Dallas Stars. So they had a very highfalutin team as well, and they had a pretty tough season, just like the 2018 Clemson team did. So pretty evenly matched team in my eyes. But if I was to put those two up against each other in your head, 2018 Clemson team against an old school 2004 USC Trojans team, who do you think wins that game?
I think it's another close one, but man, give me Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush in this one. That's a tough one to pick against Trevor Lawrence and that team, but Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush, had two great careers in the NFL. It's just a tough one, and like we said on those other matchups, that was completely a different era of college football. It seemed like they played a little bit more grit, a little bit more boom in the shoulder pads, if you will. And I think that USC team would get it done.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree too. I just think Reggie Bush was a whole nother animal on his own. And I think some of the modern teams today, if you put Reggie Bush in his prime in today's college football, I think a lot of teams probably have a tough time stopping him, to be honest. That guy was on a whole nother level of just insane. So down to our final four, we'll have 2001 Miami team versus the 2006 Texas team. and a 2019 LSU team versus a 2004 USC team, and we will wrap that up next week all the way to the who we think will win the championship. So,
yeah, fantastic stuff there. Great matchups to talk about some of the best college football teams of all time. Like we said, those other games are coming up. Semifinals this weekend. You've got starting on January the 9th, Notre Dame, Penn State in the Capital One Orange Bowl at 6:30. And then on January 10th, Texas, Ohio State at 6:30 in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic down in Jerry World. Two great matchups to determine who's going to be in that national title game on January 20th. We'll be right back here next Monday to talk about these results and to, potentially talk about, this national championship, who it's going to be. Kind of our quick thoughts on there. And then we'll have a preview show later on for that national title game. But it should be another fun weekend of college football. These two games should be super close games. I don't expect a blowout in either of these games. We've been wrong about that before in some of these matchups already. But with it getting down to the semifinals, I think it's going to be a lot closer, a lot more back and forth, good games to watch. So enjoy the weekend of college football, and we'll be right back here next Monday to talk about these results. So until then, have a good weekend and enjoy this great weekend of college football.